The blue cashmere sweater felt impossibly soft between Courtney Harvey's fingers as she wrapped it carefully in silver tissue paper. 5 years together deserved something special, something that would bring out the striking slate gray of Larkin's eyes. She smiled to herself, thinking about how perfectly the gift captured their relationship. Warm, comfortable, yet still capable of surprising. Just like Larkin had surprised her that first night at Phoebe's gallery opening, approaching with 2 glasses of champagne and a quiet confidence that made her notice him immediately among the crowd of pretentious art enthusiasts. Her phone buzzed against the kitchen counter, interrupting her precise creasing of the wrapping paper's corners. Unknown number. Courtney hesitated, then answered with a cautious, "Hello? Is this Courtney Harvey?" The woman's voice on the other end sounded controlled, but strained, like someone working hard to maintain composure. "Yes. Who's calling?" Courtney wedged the phone between her ear and shoulder, continuing to fold the wrapping paper. "My name is Riley Atwell. I believe you're in a relationship with my husband, Larkin Bryant." The tissue paper tore under Courtney's suddenly rigid fingers. A cold sensation spread through her chest, as though someone had opened a freezer door directly against her heart. "I'm sorry. There must be some mistake. Larkin's wife passed away before we met." A sound came through the phone, something between a bitter laugh and a gasp. "Well, that's certainly news to me, since I'm very much alive. I've been trying to reach him for weeks about signing our divorce papers." Courtney's mind raced through 5 years of memories, searching for inconsistencies, for any hint that the foundation of her relationship might be built on something other than truth. Larkin had always been reluctant to discuss his deceased wife, saying it was too painful, that he preferred to focus on the present, on their happiness together. She'd respected his boundaries, never pushing too hard about his past. "This is some kind of sick joke," Courtney said, her voice shaking despite her efforts to sound firm. "I don't know who you really are, but please don't call this number again." "Wait!" The urgency in the woman's voice stopped Courtney from hanging up. He folds his socks into perfect thirds before putting them in the drawer, top drawer, right side. And he can't sleep unless the bedroom door is exactly 45 degrees open. Does that sound like information a stranger would know? The half-wrapped sweater slipped from Courtney's fingers, landing in a soft heap on the kitchen floor. Those peculiar habits, the sock folding she'd teased him about countless times, the door position he insisted was necessary for proper air circulation while sleeping, were exactly right. Intimately right. "I'll call you back," Courtney managed, ending the call before her voice could betray the earthquake happening inside her chest. She stood frozen in her sunny kitchen, the anniversary dinner preparations abandoned around her, marinating steaks, potatoes waiting to be roasted, the bottle of Larkin's favorite Cabernet breathing on the counter. The celebration that just moments ago had felt so certain now seemed like a cruel joke. Her phone buzzed again. A text message from the same unknown number. "I'm sorry to disrupt your life. I truly had no idea he was with someone else. But I need these papers signed so I can move on with my life too." Courtney's finger hovered over the block button. This had to be some cruel prank or a case of mistaken identity. Yet those intimate details gnawed at her certainty. She found herself opening her camera roll, scrolling back through their shared history. Holidays, weekends away, ordinary moments that had seemed so genuine. Had she ever actually seen photographs of his life before her? When she thought about it, Larkin had almost no physical mementos of his past. No old photo albums, no family heirlooms. His explanation, that losing his wife had made him want to start fresh, had seemed reasonable at the time. She walked to their bedroom, her movements mechanical. The top drawer of his dresser slid open with a soft whisper. There they were, socks in perfect thirds, arranged in neat rows. Something about seeing them now, knowing that another woman knew this same intimate detail, made Courtney's stomach clench. Without allowing herself to think too deeply about what she was doing, she began searching the closet. Behind his winter coats, she found a locked metal box she'd never seen before. Her hands trembled as she set it on the bed. He kept the spare keys in his desk drawer. Would one of them? The small brass key fit perfectly. Inside the box lay a collection of documents: birth certificate, car insurance, old tax returns. Near the bottom, partially hidden beneath other papers, was an envelope containing what was unmistakably a marriage certificate. Courtney's heart pounded as she carefully unfolded it. Larkin Bryant and Riley Atwell, married 8 years ago. What she didn't find was any death certificate, no obituary, nothing to indicate Riley Atwell had ever ceased to exist. Courtney sank onto the edge of the bed, the document trembling in her hands. 5 years of her life suddenly called into question. 5 years of love, of building a life together, of trusting without reservation. 5 birthdays, 5 Christmases, countless ordinary Tuesday nights curled together on the couch. Had any of it been real? The sound of keys in the front door sent a jolt of adrenaline through her body. She hastily returned the documents to the box, but left it open on the bed. Some part of her wanted him to see it, to know that whatever explanation he had better come quickly. "Court, you home?" Larkin's voice, so familiar and beloved, now sounded like it belonged to a stranger. She heard him moving through the apartment, likely noticing the half-prepared dinner, the gift wrapping abandoned on the kitchen floor. "Courtney." His voice was closer now, tinged with concern. She couldn't speak, couldn't find any words adequate to bridge the chasm that had opened between them. Instead, she sat perfectly still, waiting for the inevitable moment when he would enter the bedroom and see what she'd discovered. His footsteps paused at the threshold. She didn't turn around, but she felt the exact moment when he saw the open box, the papers spread across the bed. The air in the room seemed to crystallize, time suspending itself in the space between heartbeats. Courtney, just her name, spoken so softly it was almost a whisper, loaded with a world of implications. "Riley called me today," she said, her voice surprisingly steady. "Apparently, she needs your signature on some divorce papers." The silence that followed was answer enough. "She's not dead, is she?" Courtney finally turned to face him. She never was. Larkin's face had drained of color. His normally confident posture collapsed in on itself. For a moment, he looked like he might deny it, might try to maintain the elaborate fiction he'd constructed. Then, his shoulders sagged. "No," he admitted, the single syllable seeming to cost him tremendous effort. "She's not dead." 5 years, Larkin." Courtney's voice cracked. 5 years, and everything I thought I knew about you, about us, was built on a lie so fundamental I can't even begin to comprehend it. "Not everything," he said quickly, taking a step toward her. "What we have is real, Courtney. It's the most real thing in my life." "How can you possibly say that?" The anger she'd been holding at bay surged forward. "You've been legally married to another woman our entire relationship. You let me believe she was dead. What kind of person does that?" "A broken one," he answered, his voice barely audible. "A coward who couldn't face his past." Outside, rain began to fall, droplets spattering against the bedroom window in an accelerating rhythm that matched Courtney's heartbeat. She wanted to scream, to throw things, to demand answers to questions she wasn't even sure how to formulate. Instead, she found herself asking the one that seemed most pressing. Why? The single word contained multitudes. Why lie? Why continue lying? Why her? Why any of this? Larkin sank down against the wall, as though his legs could no longer support him. "Because telling you the truth meant admitting it to myself," he said finally. "And I wasn't ready to face what I'd done, running away instead of dealing with my problems. It was easier to say she died than to admit I was the one who disappeared." Lightning flashed outside the window, briefly illuminating the room in harsh white light. In that instant, Courtney saw Larkin with painful clarity. Not the confident, loving partner she'd built a life with, but a man haunted by mistakes he'd never had the courage to confront. "I need you to tell me everything," she said, gathering the scattered papers from the bed. "No more lies. No more convenient omissions. I want the whole truth, right now, or I walk out that door and never look back." As the storm intensified outside, Larkin began to speak, revealing the real story of the man she thought she knew, the marriage that had fallen apart, the betrayal he couldn't forgive, the coward who had fled, rather than face the painful process of ending things properly. With each revelation, the Larkin she had loved for 5 years seemed to dissolve before her eyes, replaced by a stranger wearing a familiar face. By the time he finished speaking, the storm had passed, leaving behind an eerie calm that matched the emotional numbness spreading through Courtney's body. The anniversary dinner sat forgotten in the kitchen. The carefully chosen blue sweater remained half-wrapped on the floor, and the future she had imagined just hours earlier had vanished like footprints on a beach, washed away by an incoming tide of unwelcome truth. "I think you should leave," she said finally, her voice hollow. I can't even look at you right now." "Courtney, please," Larkin's voice broke, tears streaming freely down his face. "It was wrong, I know that. But what we have, she interrupted, is a relationship founded on the most fundamental breach of trust I can imagine. I don't know who you are anymore. Maybe I never did." As Larkin gathered a few essentials with shaking hands, Courtney stood by the window, watching the last raindrops slide down the glass. Each droplet seemed to contain a memory. The first time he'd told her he loved her. Their trip to the coast last summer. The night they'd stayed up until dawn discussing their dreams for the future. Had any of it been real? Or was she merely a convenient escape? A fresh start, untainted by his past mistakes? When the apartment door closed behind him, the silence felt oppressive. Courtney moved through the rooms like a ghost, turning off the oven, corking the wine, gathering the torn wrapping paper. Mechanical actions to keep her hands busy, while her mind reeled. In the bathroom, she caught sight of her reflection. Pale, eyes wide with shock, a stranger mirroring the disorientation she felt inside. Her phone buzzed again. Another message from Riley Atwell. "I didn't mean to destroy anything. I just want closure so I can move forward." Closure. Such a simple word for such a complicated process. Courtney stared at the message, wondering what closure would even look like for her now. How could she possibly move forward when the past 5 years had just been revealed as something other than what she'd believed? She typed a reply before she could reconsider. "I'd like to meet. There are things I need to understand." The response came almost immediately. "Tomorrow? Meridian Coffee at 10? "I'll be there," Courtney confirmed, then set her phone down and curled up on the couch, pulling a throw blanket around her shoulders despite the warm spring evening. Outside, the city lights blinked on one by one, illuminating a world that continued turning despite the fact that hers had just stopped on its axis. Tomorrow, she would meet the woman who should have been a ghost, the living embodiment of the lie that had just shattered her reality. Tonight, she would allow herself to feel the full weight of betrayal, to grieve for the relationship she had believed in so completely. As midnight approached, the moment when they should have been toasting to 5 years together, Courtney finally allowed the tears to come, hot and relentless, until exhaustion pulled her into a fitful sleep, her dreams filled with faceless women and men who disappeared like smoke whenever she reached for them. Meridian Coffee Shop pulsed with mid-morning energy, the rhythmic hiss of the espresso machine, the murmur of conversations, the occasional burst of laughter. Courtney sat at a corner table, fingers wrapped tightly around a ceramic mug that had long since gone cold. She'd arrived 30 minutes early, needing time to compose herself, to rehearse the questions swirling through her mind. What does she look like? Will I see Larkin in her mannerisms? Does she hate me as much as I should hate her? The door chimed. A slender woman in a navy blazer entered, her eyes scanning the room with purpose. Courtney recognized her instantly, though they had never met. It wasn't that Riley Atwell resembled Larkin in any tangible way. Rather, she carried herself with the same quiet confidence that had first drawn Courtney to him. Shoulders back, chin slightly elevated, movements deliberate and graceful. Their eyes met across the busy cafe. A flicker of recognition passed between them. Two women connected by an invisible thread, woven by the same man who had altered both their lives. Riley approached the table, her expression a careful neutral that Courtney suspected mirrored her own. "Courtney?" Riley's voice matched her appearance, composed, but with an undercurrent of tension. "Yes." Courtney gestured to the chair across from her. "Thank you for coming." Riley slid into the seat, placing her handbag on the empty chair beside her. Up close, Courtney could see the faint shadows beneath her expertly applied makeup, the slight redness around her eyes that suggested a night as sleepless as her own had been. "I ordered you a coffee," Courtney said, indicating the untouched mug beside her own. "I wasn't sure how you take it, so I asked them to bring cream and sugar. Black is fine." Riley wrapped her hands around the mug in a gesture so similar to Courtney's own that it sent an uncomfortable shiver down her spine. "I should start by saying I had no idea about you. Not until very recently." Courtney nodded, struggling to reconcile the flesh-and-blood woman before her with the ghost she had imagined for 5 years. "When did you find out? About me, I mean." 3 weeks ago." Riley took a careful sip of her coffee. "I hired a private investigator to find Larkin. I've been trying to finalize our divorce for years, but he kept disappearing, changing his number, avoiding service." She set the mug down with precision. "The investigator found him, found your address. I tried contacting Larkin directly first. When he blocked my number, I realized I needed to try a different approach." "He blocked you?" Courtney's chest tightened with fresh betrayal. So he had known. It wasn't just a case of mail going to an old address or messages never delivered. He had actively prevented Riley from reaching him, had maintained his elaborate fiction even as it began to unravel. "Every number I called from, every email address. That's why I finally called you." Riley's gaze was direct, unflinching. "I need to move forward with my life, and I can't do that while I'm still legally tied to a man who refuses to acknowledge my existence." The irony wasn't lost on Courtney. For years, she had been the one acknowledged, loved, built a life with, while Riley had been erased, reduced to a painful memory, too difficult to discuss. Now their positions felt reversed. Riley was the reality, solid and undeniable, while Courtney's relationship seemed to evaporate into fiction the more she examined it. "Did he tell you why he left?" Courtney asked, the question that had kept her awake through the night finally finding voice. "Last night, he told me you had an affair with his best friend, that the betrayal was so devastating, he couldn't bear to face either of you again." Something flashed across Riley's face. Pain, recognition, resignation. "Of course that's what he told you." She closed her eyes briefly. "There was an affair, but it wasn't what ended our marriage. It was a symptom of what was already broken." Courtney leaned forward, hunger for the truth overwhelming her initial reluctance. "Tell me what really happened." Riley's gaze drifted to the window, to the pedestrians hurrying past, each immersed in their own private universes. "We were college sweethearts, married young, too young looking back. By our 3rd anniversary, we were living separate lives under the same roof. He was consumed with building his career, traveling constantly. I was lonely, isolated." She turned back to Courtney. "I'm not excusing what I did. The affair was wrong, period. But when Larkin found out, I begged him to try counseling, to work through it together." "And he refused?" Courtney prompted when Riley fell silent. "Worse, he seemed to agree at first, scheduled the appointment himself. The day before our first session, he disappeared, left for work, and never came home. No note, no call, nothing. Just vanished." Riley's composure cracked slightly. "Do you have any idea what that does to a person? Not knowing if the person you shared your life with is dead or alive? I filed missing persons reports. called hospitals. For months, I lived in this terrible limbo, imagining the worst. Courtney felt a creeping nausea. The Larkin she knew, thoughtful, considerate, the man who brought her soup when she was sick and remembered every anniversary, even the small ones, seemed incapable of such calculated cruelty. Eventually, I hired a private investigator for the first time, Riley continued. Found out he'd simply started over in a new city, new job. When I confronted him, he agreed to divorce me, but never followed through with the paperwork. Every few years, I'd track him down again, and the cycle would repeat. New city, new number, new excuses. But why? Courtney whispered, the question directed more at the universe than at Riley. Why not just sign the papers and be done with it? Because signing meant acknowledging what he'd done, running instead of facing problems. Riley's words echoed Larkin's confession from the night before. It meant admitting he wasn't the wronged hero of his own story, but someone who'd caused pain, too. A long silence stretched between them, filled with the ambient noise of the coffee shop, the whir of the blender, the soft jazz playing overhead, the barista calling out completed orders. Ordinary sounds from an ordinary day that somehow felt surreal against the extraordinary conversation taking place in their corner. I have to ask, Riley said finally, was he happy? With you? The question caught Courtney off guard. She expected anger from this woman, resentment, perhaps even blame. Not this quiet curiosity tinged with something that sounded almost like concern. I thought so. Courtney traced the rim of her mug with one finger. We were happy. At least, I was. Now, I'm not sure about him. How could he be truly happy while maintaining such an enormous lie? Riley nodded, understanding passing between them. Two women who had loved the same deeply flawed man, each processing a different kind of betrayal. I'm engaged, Riley said after a moment, extending her left hand to reveal a simple emerald ring. Jasper is a good man, honest. After everything with Larkin, I didn't think I could trust anyone again. But Jasper was patient, persistent. A soft smile transformed her face. We're supposed to be married in 4 months, but I can't move forward with Jasper while I'm still legally tied to Larkin. Something about seeing Riley's engagement ring, tangible evidence of her determination to build a new life, strengthened Courtney's resolve. She pulled out her phone. I'm going to text him, she said, fingers hovering over the screen. I'll tell him he needs to meet us here, now, with whatever paperwork needs to be signed. No more running. Riley looked startled. You don't have to involve yourself in this. It's not your mess to clean up. 5 years of my life makes it my mess too. Courtney began typing. Besides, I need answers as much as you need signatures. The message sent, Courtney set her phone on the table between them, a bridge connecting their separate experiences. They ordered fresh coffee and waited in a strangely comfortable silence. Two women united by circumstance, by shared disillusionment, by the peculiar intimacy that comes from having loved the same person. 45 minutes later, the cafe door opened. Larkin stood frozen in the entrance, his gaze traveling from Courtney to Riley, and back again. The color drained from his face as he registered the significance of the two women sitting together. For a moment, Courtney thought he might turn and flee. Then, with visible effort, he crossed to their table. Sit down, Riley said, her tone leaving no room for argument. Larkin complied, looking physically ill as he took the empty chair between them. His eyes were bloodshot, his usually meticulous appearance disheveled. He had aged overnight, new lines etched around his mouth, the gray at his temples suddenly more pronounced. I brought the divorce papers, he said, pulling a manila envelope from his messenger bag. They're signed. Riley reached for the envelope, her movements cautious, as though she couldn't quite believe this moment was finally happening. Just like that? After years of avoiding me? Seeing you two together. His voice faltered. I can't run anymore. Not from either of you. You should never have run in the first place, Courtney said, the anger she'd been suppressing bubbling to the surface. Do you have any idea the damage you've caused? The years you've stolen from both of us? Larkin flinched. I know what I did was unforgivable. Then why? Riley's question cut through the tension. Why disappear like that? Why let me believe something terrible had happened to you? Why tell Courtney I was dead? He stared down at his hands, knuckles white where they gripped the edge of the table. Because I was a coward. The admission seemed to deflate him further. When I found out about the affair, something inside me broke. Not just because you cheated, Riley, but because our entire marriage felt like a failure I couldn't face. Disappearing seemed easier than divorce, than admitting we'd failed, than dealing with the mess. And me? Courtney pressed. Why maintain the lie for 5 years? Why not tell me the truth once we became serious? Because I loved you, he said simply, meeting her eyes for the first time. And I was terrified of losing you. The longer I waited, the harder it became to tell the truth. At first, I told myself it didn't matter, that my past was behind me. Then, when things got serious between us, I convinced myself you'd leave if you knew what I'd done. So instead, you built our entire relationship on a foundation of lies? Courtney's voice broke. Did you ever stop to think that was worse? I didn't think at all, Larkin admitted. I just reacted, the same way I did when I left Riley. Running from problems became my default. The lies started small, but it grew until it consumed everything. Riley methodically reviewed each page of the divorce papers, verifying his signatures. These appear to be in order, she said finally. I'll have my lawyer process them immediately. She gathered her belongings, then paused, studying Larkin with an expression Courtney couldn't quite read. Not hatred or even anger, but something closer to pity. I forgive you, Riley said quietly. Not for your sake, but for mine. I'm not carrying this weight anymore. She turned to Courtney. Thank you for helping make this happen after all these years. After Riley departed, an awkward silence descended between Courtney and Larkin. The bustling cafe continued around them, patrons ordering drinks, tapping on laptops, engaged in animated conversations. Ordinary people living ordinary lives untouched by the seismic revelations occurring at their small corner table. I never meant to hurt you, Larkin finally said, his voice barely audible above the ambient noise. Everything between us, my feelings for you, our life together, that was real. The only lie was about my past. But that lie infected everything else, Courtney replied, gathering her coat and bag. How can I trust anything you say now? How can I believe in a future with someone who could maintain such a deception for years? Please! He reached for her hand across the table. Give me a chance to prove myself, to earn back your trust. I'm getting help. I called a therapist this morning. I want to understand why I did this. Why I run instead of facing problems. I want to be better. For you. For a moment, Courtney allowed their fingers to touch, feeling the familiar warmth of his skin against hers. 5 years of memories flashed through her mind. Laughter, tenderness, quiet moments of perfect understanding. Had it all been a mirage? Or was there something real beneath the lies that might still be salvaged? I need time, she said finally, withdrawing her hand. I need to process everything that's happened, to figure out if there's anything left to save. Outside the cafe, spring sunshine illuminated the city street, a perfect day that felt at odds with the turmoil inside her. Courtney walked aimlessly, letting her feet carry her through familiar neighborhoods that suddenly seemed strange, changed by her new perspective. At a small park, she found an empty bench and sat, watching children play on the swings, couples walking hand in hand, a man throwing a stick for his enthusiastic golden retriever. Ordinary moments from ordinary lives. Had her life with Larkin been ordinary too, beneath the extraordinary deception? Or had the lie been the foundation for everything they built together? She didn't know. The only certainty was that nothing would ever be the same again. Her phone buzzed with a text from Phoebe. Haven't heard from you since yesterday. Everything okay with the anniversary surprise? Courtney stared at the message, unsure how to even begin explaining what had transpired. Finally, she typed, Can I come over? Something's happened. "Doors open," came the immediate reply. As Courtney made her way to her friend's apartment, she felt like a shipwreck survivor swimming toward distant shore, exhausted, disoriented, but propelled forward by the fundamental human instinct to survive. Whatever came next, whatever she ultimately decided about Larkin and their relationship, she would endure. She had to. The alternative, drowning in betrayal and disillusionment, was unthinkable. The question that haunted her with each step was deceptively simple, yet impossibly complex. Can love built on lies ever be transformed into something true? Phoebe Duncan's loft apartment was a haven of organized chaos. Canvases in various stages of completion leaned against exposed brick walls, art supplies colonized every flat surface, and the faint scent of oil paint hung perpetually in the air. As a gallery curator with artistic aspirations of her own, Phoebe lived surrounded by creativity in a space that reflected her uncompromising authenticity. It was exactly what Courtney needed, a place where truth was valued, above all else. "Holy shit," Phoebe whispered, after Courtney finished recounting the events of the past 24 hours. They sat cross-legged on Phoebe's paint-splattered couch, an open bottle of wine between them despite the early hour. "His wife is alive? And you met her? And she's engaged to someone else?" Each question rose higher in pitch than the last. Ex-wife, technically, or soon-to-be ex. Once the divorce is processed, Courtney took a long sip of her wine, savoring the momentary burn that distracted from the persistent ache in her chest. Riley was surprisingly decent about everything. It wasn't her fault after all. She didn't know about me either. Both of you caught in Larkin's web of lies. Phoebe shook her head, indignation flushing her cheeks. "I always thought there was something too perfect about him, you know? Like he'd been constructed in some sort of boyfriend laboratory." "What do you mean? Remember when you first started dating? How he seemed to align perfectly with everything you wanted." Phoebe refilled their glasses. "You mentioned loving old jazz once, and suddenly he had this extensive vinyl collection. You talked about wanting to visit the Pacific Northwest, and, mysteriously, he'd already hiked every trail worth mentioning." Courtney frowned, memories shifting into new configurations under this fresh lens. "I thought we just had a lot in common. Maybe you did. But looking back, it always felt like he was adapting to become whatever you wanted, rather than showing you who he truly was." Phoebe hesitated. "I never said anything because you seemed so happy, and I figured I was just being cynical." "I was happy." The past tense felt like a betrayal of its own, an acknowledgement that something precious had been irretrievably lost. That's what makes this so difficult to process. If our relationship had been obviously broken, walking away would be easier. A sudden memory surfaced. Larkin bringing her coffee in bed every Sunday morning, prepared exactly how she liked it. A ritual that had begun after she'd casually mentioned missing the Sunday brunches of her childhood. Had that thoughtfulness been genuine affection, or another performance designed to create the perfect partner she wanted? How could she possibly distinguish between authentic connection and elaborate artifice? "What are you thinking?" Phoebe asked, watching Courtney's expression closely. "I'm wondering if I ever really knew him at all." Courtney set her wine glass down. "And I'm trying to figure out what to do next." "You don't have to decide anything right now." Phoebe squeezed her hand. "Give yourself permission to just feel whatever you're feeling." What Courtney felt was a disorienting mixture of grief, anger, confusion, and, most disturbing of all, lingering love. Despite everything, her heart hadn't received the memo that Larkin was no longer the person she'd believed him to be. 5 years of emotional investment couldn't be erased overnight, no matter how justified the cause. "He wants another chance," she said quietly. "He's starting therapy. Says he wants to understand why he did this, why he runs from problems instead of facing them." Phoebe's expression remained carefully neutral. "And what do you want? That's the question, isn't it?" Courtney moved to the window, watching the afternoon light cast long shadows across the cityscape. "Part of me wants to walk away and never look back. But another part, she trailed off, struggling to articulate the complexity of her feelings. Another part still loves him, Phoebe finished for her. Is that crazy? After what he did? It's human. Phoebe joined her at the window. Hearts don't come with on-off switches, Court. They're messy, complicated organs that don't always align with our rational minds. Courtney rested her forehead against the cool glass. I told him I needed time. But I don't know if time will make this any clearer. Then maybe it's not clarity you need right now, Phoebe suggested. Maybe you need to experience all the confusion and hurt before you can decide anything. I've been thinking about what Riley said, about how she's forgiven him for her own sake, not his. Courtney turned from the window. I'm not there yet. I'm still so angry I can barely breathe sometimes. But I also don't want this betrayal to define me, to make me someone who can never trust again. That's already a healthier perspective than most people would have 24 hours after a bomb like this, Phoebe observed. Stay with me for a few days. Give yourself space to think without his presence influencing you. Third, the offer was exactly what Courtney needed. Sanctuary, time to breathe, permission to prioritize her own healing. She sent a brief text to Larkin explaining she was staying with Phoebe indefinitely and needed space without communication. Then she turned off her phone, allowing herself to disconnect completely from the reality that had imploded around her. The next week passed in a blur of small mercies. Phoebe's guest room became Courtney's retreat. Her design work, creating promotional materials for an upcoming exhibition at Phoebe's gallery, provided welcome distraction during the day. Evenings were spent talking through her feelings or sitting in companionable silence, sketching while Phoebe painted. On the 8th day, curiosity finally overcame Courtney's resistance. She turned her phone back on, steeling herself for whatever awaited. Dozens of notifications appeared, but fewer than she'd expected. Just 3 texts from Larkin, spaced days apart, each respecting her request for space, while expressing his commitment to making amends if she decided to give him that chance. The most recent, sent the previous evening, was different. I had my second therapy session today. I'm starting to understand that what I did to both you and Riley stems from childhood patterns I've never addressed. It doesn't excuse anything, but I want you to know I'm committed to this process regardless of your decision about us. You deserve nothing less than complete honesty, and I failed to give you that. I'm truly sorry. Courtney read the message several times. There was a quality to it that felt different from his previous communications, a rawness, an absence of the polished charm that had always come so naturally to him. It sounded like Larkin stripped of pretense, speaking a truth that cost him something to acknowledge. That evening, after dinner with Phoebe, Courtney found herself drawn to her sketchbook, pencil moving almost of its own accord. The image that emerged surprised her. 2 trees grown so close their branches had become intertwined, roots extending beneath the soil to form a complex, inseparable network. Yet one tree was transparent in places, partially erased, its solidity called into question. That's haunting, Phoebe said, glancing over her shoulder. Is it him and you? I think so. Courtney studied the drawing. Parts of him were real, parts were fabrication. And now I'm trying to disentangle which was which. Maybe you need to see him to figure that out, Phoebe suggested carefully. Not to get back together necessarily, but to ask the questions you need answered. The idea took root. After another day of consideration, Courtney texted Larkin, I'm ready to talk. Tomorrow, 4 p.m., Riverside Park near the cherry trees. His response was immediate. I'll be there. Thank you for this chance. The spring afternoon was perfect. Gentle sunshine, trees heavy with pink blossoms, the air sweet with possibility. Courtney arrived early, finding a bench with a view of the river. Watching the water flow past, she felt a strange calm descend. Whatever happened next, she would survive it. The past 9 days had taught her that much. She spotted Larkin before he saw her, walking with uncharacteristic hesitation, hands shoved deep in his pockets. He'd lost weight, his clothes hanging slightly loose on his frame. When he finally noticed her, the naked hope and fear on his face made something twist painfully in her chest. "Thank you for meeting me," he said, remaining standing until she gestured for him to sit beside her. "How's therapy going?" she asked, starting with neutral territory. "Challenging. Necessary." He looked down at his hands. "Turns out, disappearing when things get difficult has been my pattern since childhood. My father left when I was 8. My mother shut down emotionally afterward. I learned early that the people you love can vanish, physically or emotionally, without warning. That explains some things, but it doesn't justify what you did." "I know." He met her gaze directly. "I'm not offering explanations as excuses, just trying to understand myself so I can change these patterns." They sat in silence, watching a pair of ducks glide across the river's surface, leaving smooth ripples in their wake. "I need to ask you something," Courtney said finally, "and I need absolute honesty, even if it's painful." "Anything. Was any of it real?" Her voice caught. "Us, I mean. Or was I just convenient, an escape from your past?" Pain flashed across his face. "It was real. All of it. My feelings for you have always been genuine." He shifted to face her more directly. "The lie about Riley. That was about my shame, my inability to face my failures. It was never about how I felt about you." "But how can I possibly know that?" Courtney pressed. "How can I trust anything you say when you maintained such an enormous deception for years?" "You can't. Not right now." His honesty surprised her. Trust has to be rebuilt over time, through consistent actions. Words aren't enough anymore. I understand that. Another silence stretched between them, filled with the ambient sounds of the park. Children laughing, a distant saxophone player practicing, the gentle rustle of cherry blossoms in the breeze. "I've been staying with Phoebe," Courtney said. "I'm going to find my own place. I can't come back to the apartment. Not yet. Maybe not ever." He nodded, accepting this without protest. "I understand. I haven't decided about us," she continued. "I don't know if what we had can be salvaged, or if it should be." She took a deep breath. "But I do know that I need to see who you really are. Not the person you thought I wanted, not the carefully curated version you presented, but the actual, flawed human being underneath all that. I want that too." His voice was thick with emotion. "To be known, truly known, even the parts of me I've always been ashamed of." "This isn't a reconciliation," Courtney clarified. I don't know what it is. A chance to see if there's anything worth saving, I guess." "That's more than I deserve." The simple acknowledgement suggested a level of self-awareness that the old Larkin had never demonstrated. They agreed to a cautious path forward. Occasional conversations, absolute honesty, no pressure or expectations. As they parted ways, Courtney felt both the weight of uncertainty and the lightening of having taken action, of moving from passive suffering into deliberate choice. 3 days later, an unexpected text arrived from Riley. "The divorce is officially filed. Should be finalized in 90 days. Thought you'd want to know." Courtney stared at the message, struck by the strange intimacy of this communication from a woman who, under different circumstances, she might never have met. On impulse, she replied, "Thank you for letting me know. How are you doing with everything?" The response came quickly. "Better than expected. Wedding plans moving forward. Jasper has been incredibly understanding about the whole situation. You?" "Taking it day by day," Courtney wrote back. "Still figuring out what comes next. If you ever want to talk about Larkin, about moving forward, about anything really, I'm here. Strange as it sounds, you're the only person who truly understands this particular situation." The offer was unexpected, but welcome. "I might take you up on that sometime," Courtney responded. That evening, as she packed the last of her essential belongings from the apartment she'd shared with Larkin, he'd arranged to be absent, giving her space, Courtney found herself lingering over shared possessions, photo albums, artwork they'd chosen together, the vintage record player he'd restored for her birthday. Each item seemed to exist in a liminal space between truth and fiction, neither fully authentic nor entirely false. In the bedroom, She opened the drawer that had once contained his perfectly folded socks, now emptied except for a small velvet box she'd never seen before. Her heart stuttered as she lifted it, already suspecting what lay inside. The ring was exactly her taste, a vintage emerald surrounded by tiny diamonds, elegant but not ostentatious. An envelope beneath it contained a receipt dated 3 months earlier. He'd been planning to propose. Despite everything, the lies, the hidden past, he had intended to deepen their commitment, to build a future together. The realization didn't erase his betrayal, but it complicated her understanding of it. This hadn't been a casual deception maintained out of convenience. It had been a desperate, misguided attempt to preserve something he genuinely valued, something he had been willing to make permanent. Courtney closed the box and replaced it carefully, leaving it where she'd found it. Whatever it represented, genuine love, misguided hope, or something in between, would be part of the complex reality she and Larkin needed to navigate if they had any chance of finding their way back to truth. Outside, the city hummed with evening energy. Lights flickering on in apartment windows, couples strolling hand in hand, solo pedestrians hurrying toward unknown destinations. Courtney joined the flow of humanity. A woman in transition, moving between what had been and what might yet be, carrying both grief and possibility with each deliberate step forward. The one-bedroom apartment Courtney leased was a blank canvas. White walls, hardwood floors, generous windows framing a view of the city she had never seen from quite this angle. Located 15 blocks from the home she'd shared with Larkin, it represented both escape and new beginning. Each day, she added small touches that made the space uniquely hers: framed sketches, plants cascading from macrame hangers, a vintage drafting table positioned to catch the morning light. "It's coming together nicely," Phoebe observed, helping Courtney arrange a collection of art books on newly installed floating shelves. 6 weeks had passed since the revelation that had fractured her life into before and after. How does it feel to have your own space again? Liberating. Terrifying. Courtney adjusted a small ceramic vase, a relic from her life before Larkin. "I keep discovering parts of myself I'd forgotten. Habits and preferences that got submerged in the process of becoming us instead of me." "Like what?" Phoebe settled onto the window seat, legs tucked beneath her. "Small things, mostly. I've always been a morning person, but Larkin functions better at night, so I gradually shifted my schedule to match his. Now I'm up at 5:30 again, watching the sun rise while I sketch." Courtney joined her friend by the window. "Or how I've started cooking with cilantro again, which he always claimed to hate. Just yesterday I realized I'd stopped wearing certain jewelry because he once mentioned it wasn't his style." "The slow erosion of self that happens in so many relationships," Phoebe mused. "Sometimes I think that's why I'm still single. Stubborn refusal to sand down my edges to fit someone else's puzzle. There's healthy compromise, and then there's whatever I was doing." Courtney sighed. "The thing is, I can't blame it all on Larkin. He never explicitly asked me to change those things. I just did, automatically, wanting to please him, to maintain the harmony between us." The realization had been uncomfortable, but necessary, recognizing her own role in constructing the dynamic that had defined their relationship. While Larkin's deception about his past remained inexcusable, Courtney had been forced to acknowledge that long before learning of his lie, she had been complicit in creating a relationship based partly on performance rather than authenticity. "Speaking of Larkin," Phoebe said carefully, "how are things progressing with whatever it is you two are doing?" "Honestly, I don't know." Courtney moved to the kitchen, filling the kettle for tea. "We've met for coffee 4 times now. Each conversation is more honest than the last. He's still in therapy, still working through his issues, but I'm not sure if we're moving toward reconciliation or just a better way of ending things." Their most recent meeting had left her particularly unsettled. For the first time, Larkin had spoken in depth about his childhood. The father who had abandoned the family without explanation, the mother who had retreated into emotional unavailability, leaving young Larkin to become adept at anticipating others' needs while suppressing his own. Patterns emerged that helped explain, though not excuse, his adult behaviors. The chameleon-like ability to become whatever others wanted, the instinct to flee rather than face conflict, the terror of abandonment that led him to abandon others preemptively. "What's holding you back?" Phoebe asked. "Besides the obvious, I mean." Courtney considered the question as she prepared 2 mugs of chamomile tea. "I think I'm afraid of losing myself again," she said finally, rejoining Phoebe with the steaming mugs. "Not just because of his deception, but because of how easily I set aside parts of myself to accommodate him. If we tried again, would we fall back into those same patterns?" "That's a fair question." Phoebe blew across the surface of her tea. "But maybe the fact that you're aware of those patterns now means you'd be able to make different choices." A notification chimed on Courtney's phone. A text from Riley. "Divorce decree arrived today. It's officially final. Thought you should know." Courtney showed the message to Phoebe. "She's kept me updated throughout the process. Strange as it sounds, we've developed an unexpected connection." "The Larkin Bryant Survivors Club?" Phoebe quipped, though her expression remained thoughtful. "Have you told him about your communications with her?" "Yes. Complete honesty in all directions is our only chance, if there is a chance." Courtney typed a quick response to Riley, congratulating her on this milestone and wishing her well with wedding preparations. "Actually, I'm meeting Riley for lunch tomorrow. She wants my opinion on some design elements for her ceremony." "Now, that's a plot twist I didn't see coming." Phoebe shook her head in amazement. From deceased wife to wedding planning buddy in 2 months. Life is stranger than fiction. Courtney's smile faded as she set her phone aside. "You know what the hardest part is? Some days I miss him so intensely, it's physical, like hunger or thirst. Not even the man himself, necessarily, but the certainty I used to feel, the safety of believing I knew exactly who he was and what we meant to each other." "Certainty is overrated," Phoebe said gently. "It's usually just an illusion anyway. At least now you're dealing with reality, messy as it is." Later that evening, after Phoebe had left, Courtney stood at her new drafting table, working on illustrations for a children's book she'd been commissioned to design. The project, a story about a young girl discovering her own magic, had arrived at precisely the right moment, providing both creative challenge and financial security during her period of transition. Her phone rang, displaying Larkin's name. Their communications had been carefully scheduled until now, making this unexpected call all the more surprising. Courtney hesitated, then answered. "Courtney?" His voice sounded strained. "I'm sorry to call like this. I know we had agreed to planned conversations only." "What's wrong?" She set down her pencil, instinctively responding to the distress in his tone. "My mother died." The words came out flat, affectless. "Heart attack. My aunt just called with the news." "Oh, Larkin." Despite everything, her heart contracted with sympathy. His relationship with his mother had been complicated at best, but loss was loss. "I'm so sorry." "The thing is," his voice cracked slightly, "the funeral is this weekend in my hometown. I haven't been back there in over a decade. I don't think I can face it alone." The request hung unspoken between them. In their previous life, accompanying him would have been automatic, unquestioned. Now, it represented a potential shift in their cautious détente, a step toward something undefined. "When do you leave?" she asked, neither committing nor refusing. "Friday morning. I've booked a flight to Cleveland." A pause. "I understand if you can't come. It's a lot to ask, given everything." Courtney closed her eyes, weighing the complexities. Supporting him through this loss felt like the decent thing to do, regardless of their relationship status. Yet it also risked blurring boundaries she had carefully established, potentially leading to confusion or false expectations. "Let me think about it," she said finally. "I'll call you back in an hour." After ending the call, Courtney paced her apartment, mentally cataloging the pros and cons of accompanying Larkin to his mother's funeral. Eventually, she called Phoebe for perspective. "You're not responsible for his emotional well-being," Phoebe reminded her after listening to the situation. "Whatever you decide, make sure it's because you want to do it, not because you feel obligated." The distinction clarified something for Courtney. This wasn't about obligation. It was about choice. Choosing compassion without erasing boundaries. Choosing kindness without compromising her own needs. She called Larkin back. "I'll come with you," she said, "but I want separate hotel rooms, and I'm booking my own return flight for Sunday. This is support during a difficult time, not a reconciliation." His relief was palpable. "I understand. Thank you, Courtney. This means more than I can express." 2 days later, they sat side by side on a half-empty flight to Cleveland. The familiar scent of his aftershave triggered a cascade of memories. Lazy Sunday mornings, holiday celebrations, ordinary moments imbued with the comfortable intimacy of shared life. Courtney focused on the in-flight magazine, maintaining emotional distance even as physical proximity created its own subtle tension. "I realized something this morning," Larkin said, as the plane began its descent. "You've never met anyone from my family. Not in 5 years together." "Another way you kept your past separate," Courtney observed, the hurt still fresh despite her genuine sympathy for his current situation. "Yes," he nodded, acknowledging the truth without defensiveness. "My therapist calls it compartmentalization, keeping different parts of my life strictly separated to avoid dealing with the contradictions between them." "Is that why we never visited your hometown? Why your mother never came to see us?" "Partly." Larkin gazed out the window at the landscape below, a patchwork of suburbs surrounding the glittering surface of Lake Erie. "But it was also because returning meant confronting the person I was before I met you. The person who ran from his responsibilities, who started over without resolving anything. I was afraid if you saw where I came from, you'd somehow see through the version of myself I'd constructed." The honesty was still jarring. These moments of raw vulnerability from a man who had once seemed so carefully composed. Courtney wasn't sure if it represented genuine transformation or simply a new strategy for regaining her trust. Perhaps it was both. Cleveland greeted them with unseasonable warmth, the air heavy with impending rain. They collected a rental car and drove through neighborhoods that gradually transitioned from urban to suburban, eventually turning into a residential street lined with modest mid-century homes. "My aunt's house," Larkin explained, pulling into the driveway of a well-maintained bungalow. "She's been texting all morning, asking if I was really coming. I don't think she believed I'd show up." "Why wouldn't you come to your own mother's funeral?" Courtney asked, then immediately regretted the question as understanding dawned. "Because you've disappeared from difficult situations before." "Exactly." He turned off the engine, but made no move to exit the car. "They know me as someone who runs when things get hard. They have no reason to expect anything different." "But you're here now," Courtney pointed out. "That's already something different." The front door opened before they could continue the conversation. A slender woman with Larkin's eyes approached the car, her expression a mixture of grief and relief. Watching their embrace, awkward yet genuine, Courtney felt like an intruder witnessing something intensely private. The next 24 hours unfolded like scenes from a strange dream. Courtney was introduced as Larkin's friend to a parade of relatives who regarded her with curious eyes, and Larkin with cautious reserve. She heard snippets of conversations that painted a picture of the man she thought she knew through an entirely different lens. The talented but troubled teenager who had difficulty maintaining friendships, the college student who rarely called home, the adult son who visited infrequently and always seemed eager to leave. At dinner that evening, Larkin's Aunt Martha pulled Courtney aside, while Larkin was engaged with other relatives. "I'm glad he brought you," the older woman said, her grip on Courtney's arm surprisingly strong. "Eleanor worried about him constantly, you know. Feared he'd end up completely alone because of his tendencies." "Tendencies?" Courtney echoed, though she already suspected the answer. "To cut and run when things aren't perfect. to reinvent himself instead of working through problems. Martha's gaze was penetrating. Has he told you about his first marriage? The way he simply vanished after finding out about Riley's affair? Yes, Courtney said softly. I've actually met Riley. Recently. Martha's eyebrows shot up. Well, that's unexpected. Larkin always avoided any connection to his past. Perhaps you're a good influence. The funeral service the following morning was sparsely attended but deeply emotional. Watching Larkin deliver a halting eulogy for the mother he had kept at arm's length for years, Courtney glimpsed the profound complexity of human relationships, how love and disappointment could coexist, how absence sometimes spoke louder than presence. She was flawed, he acknowledged, voice breaking, and so was I as her son. We hurt each other through distance, through things left unsaid. I wish. He paused, visibly struggling for composure. I wish I had given us the chance to know each other as adults, to move beyond the patterns that kept us locked in old wounds. Later, at the cemetery, rain began to fall, gentle at first, then with increasing intensity. Someone produced umbrellas, black canopies unfurling above the mourners like somber flowers. Courtney stood slightly apart, watching Larkin place a single white rose on his mother's casket, the gesture somehow more poignant for its conventional simplicity. As they walked back to the car, sheltering under a shared umbrella, Larkin said quietly, "Thank you for being here. I couldn't have faced this alone." "You could have," Courtney corrected him. "You just didn't have to." That evening, in the hushed privacy of a corner booth at their hotel's restaurant, Larkin shared memories of his childhood, some tender, many painful, all contributing to the complex mosaic that had shaped him into the man capable of both genuine love and profound deception. "I used to think I was protecting you by hiding my past," he said, staring into his untouched glass of wine. "Now I understand I was really protecting myself, from judgment, from having to confront my own failures, from the terrifying possibility of being truly known and still rejected." "That's what relationships are supposed to be, though," Courtney replied, "being fully known and choosing each other anyway." His gaze met hers across the table, a current of understanding passing between them. "Is that still possible for us? After everything?" The question hung between them, weighty with implications. Courtney considered her response carefully, aware that whatever she said would shape the path forward. "I don't know," she answered honestly. "But being here, seeing this part of your life you kept hidden for so long, it helps me understand you better. Not excuse what you did, but understand the person behind the actions." Outside, the rain continued falling, transforming the hotel windows into shimmering canvases of refracted light. Tomorrow, they would part ways, Larkin staying an extra day to handle his mother's affairs, Courtney returning to her new apartment, her gradually reconstructed independence. What lay beyond that remained unwritten, a story still taking shape with each careful, honest conversation. "Whatever happens between us," Larkin said as they prepared to leave the restaurant, "I want you to know that these past 2 months of honesty have been more real than all our years together. Painful, but real. And I'll take real over perfect illusion any day." Courtney nodded, recognizing the truth in his words. Their relationship had been built on a foundation of sand, beautiful, but ultimately unstable. Whether they could rebuild on solid ground remained to be seen, but at least now they were both standing in reality, however uncomfortable it might be. 3 months after Eleanor Bryant's funeral, Courtney stood in her apartment surrounded by scattered sketches, preparing for her first solo art exhibition. What had begun as personal therapy, illustrations capturing her emotional journey through betrayal and rediscovery, had evolved into a collection Phoebe insisted deserved a proper gallery showing. Fractured Narratives, they'd titled it, visual stories of broken truths and reconstructed realities. Outside, autumn painted the city in amber and crimson, leaves spiraling down to carpet the sidewalks, the season of transformation. Courtney pinned another completed illustration to her inspiration wall, stepping back to assess its place in the collection. This particular piece depicted two silhouettes facing each other, connected by delicate threads that were simultaneously breaking and reforming, destruction and creation occurring in the same moment. Her phone chimed with a message from Riley. Wedding photos attached. Wish you could have been there. Coffee next week? Accompanying the text were images of Riley radiant in an elegant ivory gown, Jasper gazing at her with undisguised adoration. They had married in a small vineyard ceremony 2 weeks earlier, Riley officially beginning her new chapter, while Courtney remained suspended between endings and beginnings. A knock at the door interrupted her contemplation. Phoebe stood in the hallway, brandishing a bottle of champagne. Final selection day calls for celebration, she announced, sweeping into the apartment. Have you decided on the last 3 pieces? Almost. Courtney gestured to the candidates arranged across her drafting table. I'm torn between the compass with the fractured needle and the house built on shifting sands. Phoebe studied both illustrations, head tilted thoughtfully. The house. Definitely the house. It's more evocative of the journey. She glanced around the apartment, noting the empty spaces where certain furnishings had once stood. How was the storage unit excavation? Enlightening. Courtney accepted a glass of champagne. I finally sorted through the last of the items from Larkin's and my apartment, decided what to keep, what to give away, what to return to him. The process had been unexpectedly cathartic, examining shared possessions and consciously choosing which would remain part of her life moving forward. The vintage record player had stayed. The custom bookshelf they'd selected together had gone. Each decision represented another small step toward clarity. And how are things with the man himself? Phoebe settled onto the window seat that had become her designated spot. Still meeting regularly? Once a week. Courtney joined her friend, drawing her knees to her chest. Sometimes more, sometimes less, depending on what feels right. I don't know what we are exactly. It is the evolution of their relationship defied simple categorization. After Cleveland, something fundamental had shifted. Walls crumbling on both sides, allowing for a level of honesty previously unknown between them. Larkin continued his therapy, confronting the deeply ingrained patterns that had led to his elaborate deceptions. Courtney pursued her own counseling, exploring her tendency to mold herself around others' expectations rather than maintaining clear boundaries. He's different, she continued, struggling to articulate the transformation she'd witnessed. Not performance different, but fundamentally altered, like he's finally inhabiting his own skin, instead of whatever character he thought I wanted. And you? Are you different too? Phoebe's question cut to the heart of the matter. I think so. Courtney set down her champagne glass. I'm more honest about my needs, less willing to compromise essential parts of myself. I'm learning that harmony doesn't require self-erasure. Another knock interrupted their conversation. Courtney opened the door to find Larkin holding a small package wrapped in brown paper and string. Sorry to drop by unannounced, he said, remaining in the hallway rather than presuming an invitation inside. I found something while cleaning out my mother's house that I thought you should have before your exhibition. Phoebe appeared behind Courtney. Perfect timing. I was just leaving to meet a potential new artist at the gallery. She kissed Courtney's cheek and nodded to Larkin as she departed, leaving them alone. Courtney hesitated, then gestured him inside. The apartment, once neutral territory, had gradually accumulated more personal touches. Thriving plants, vibrant textiles, walls adorned with her own artwork, rather than carefully selected prints they'd chosen together. You've made this place completely your own, Larkin observed, taking in the changes since his last visit. It suits you. Thank you. She accepted the package, gesturing for him to sit, while she unwrapped it carefully. Inside lay a vintage sketchbook, bound in weathered leather. Courtney opened it to find delicate pencil drawings, landscapes, architectural details, human figures rendered with surprising sensitivity. These are beautiful, she said, turning pages with gentle fingers. Your mother's work? Mine, actually. Larkin's expression held a vulnerability that still surprised her, even after months of seeing him without his carefully constructed facade. From high school and early college, before I convinced myself that practical career paths were the only acceptable option, Courtney studied the drawings with new appreciation, recognizing elements of raw talent never mentioned during their years together. "You never told me you could draw. I stopped before I met you. It was part of a past I was trying to outrun." He gestured to the sketchbook. "My mother kept this all these years, tucked away in her attic. Finding it felt like, I don't know, like the universe offering another piece of myself back to me." "Have you drawn anything since?" "Started again last month." A shy smile flickered across his face. "Nothing worth sharing yet, but it feels good to reconnect with that part of myself." Courtney placed the sketchbook on her coffee table, struck by the significance of this revelation. Not just that Larkin had once been an artist, but that he'd concealed this authentic piece of himself during their entire relationship. "Why show me this now?" she asked. "Because I want you to know me. Really know me." His gaze held steady. "Not just the parts I think you'll approve of, or the carefully edited highlight reel I've presented to everyone my entire life. The whole messy, contradictory truth." The sincerity in his voice resonated with something Courtney had been feeling herself. The exhausting weight of performance lifted, the liberating possibility of being fully seen and accepted. "I have something to show you too," she said, crossing to her drafting table. "It's the centerpiece for my exhibition, but I haven't shown it to anyone yet. Not even Phoebe." The illustration was larger than her others, executed with painstaking detail. A woman standing at a crossroads, looking back at a path lined with beautiful illusions gradually dissolving into mist, while ahead lay multiple potential routes, each rendered with a mixture of shadow and light, challenge and possibility. "It's about choices," she explained. "About recognizing that perfect illusions ultimately leave us empty, while authentic connections, even with all their complications and difficulties, offer something real to build upon." Larkin studied the artwork, understanding dawning in his eyes. "Is this about us?" "Partly." Courtney leaned against the table. "It's about what I've learned through everything we've experienced. About what I want moving forward, whether that includes you or not." A tense silence stretched between them, the conversation approaching the territory they'd been circling for months. "That's what I came to talk about, actually," Larkin said finally. "I've been offered a position teaching architectural design at the university. Tenure track, starting next semester." "That's wonderful." Courtney felt genuine happiness for him, recognizing how this opportunity aligned with passions he'd only recently allowed himself to acknowledge. "Are you going to accept? I wanted to discuss it with you first." He hesitated. "The commitment would mean staying here long-term, building a life here, and I need to know if there's any chance that life might someday include you again." There it was, the question that had hovered unspoken between them through months of careful reconstruction, of painful honesty, of gradual healing. "I don't know," Courtney answered truthfully. "I've learned to stop making promises about the future based on incomplete information." She moved to the window, gathering her thoughts as she gazed at the autumn landscape below. "What I do know is that I'm not the same person who fell in love with you 5 years ago. And you're not the same person who told me a convenient lie about being a widower." "No," he agreed quietly. "We're not those people anymore. And that's what makes this so complicated." She turned to face him. "Because sometimes I think maybe we had to break apart completely to have any chance at building something genuine. That perhaps we needed to lose what we thought we had in order to create something real." Hope flickered across Larkin's features. "Is that what you want? To create something new together?" "I want truth," Courtney said simply. "I want to be with someone who isn't afraid to show me their whole self, the beautiful parts and the broken parts. Someone who trusts me enough to be vulnerable, to admit mistakes, to grow alongside me rather than performing perfection. And do you think I could be that person?" The question contained no manipulation, no pressure, just genuine inquiry. Courtney considered everything they'd navigated together over the past 7 months: the devastating revelation, the painful separation, the gradual building of a different kind of relationship founded on radical honesty rather than comfortable illusion. "I think you're becoming that person," she said finally, "and I think I'm becoming someone capable of maintaining healthy boundaries while still opening myself to love. The question is whether we're willing to risk trying again, knowing everything we know now." Larkin stood, moving to join her by the window, but maintaining a respectful distance. "I would risk anything for the chance to love you honestly, Courtney, but I won't push. This has to be your decision, too." She studied his face, the familiar features now animated by an authenticity she'd glimpsed only rarely during their years together. The man before her was simultaneously known and unknown, the essential core of the person she'd loved, now revealed without the carefully constructed layers of performance and protection. "I've been thinking about forgiveness," she said. "Not just forgiving you, but forgiving myself for ignoring the signs, for participating in the comfortable fiction we created together. What have you concluded? That forgiveness isn't something you achieve once and it's done. It's a practice, a daily choice to move forward without allowing past wounds to dictate future possibilities." She took a deep breath. "I've also realized that while I can't forget what happened, I don't want to be defined by it either." Outside, the afternoon light began to fade, casting long shadows across her apartment floor. In that gentle transition from day to evening, Courtney felt something shift within her. Not dramatic or sudden, but the natural culmination of months of introspection and healing. "Take the teaching position," she said. "Build your life here, and let's see where this goes." "What exactly does that mean?" Larkin asked, hope tempered by caution. "It means I'm open to possibilities." Courtney allowed herself to reach for his hand, the first deliberate physical contact she'd initiated in months. "It means I'd like to try dating again, starting fresh, as the people we are now, not the people we pretended to be." His fingers intertwined with hers, warm and solid. "I'd like that very much. But with conditions," she continued firmly. "Complete honesty, always, even when it's uncomfortable. Respect for each other's independence and boundaries. And patience. This isn't going to be quick or easy." "I understand." His voice was steady, his gaze direct. "I'll earn your trust again, Courtney, however long it takes." 2 weeks later, Courtney stood in Phoebe's gallery, surrounded by friends and admirers at the opening of Fractured Narratives. The exhibition had drawn unexpected attention, critics praising the emotional depth and technical skill evident in her illustrations of broken and reconstructed realities. Across the room, Larkin chatted with Riley and Jasper, who had driven in specifically for the opening. The unlikely friendship between the former spouses had been yet another surprise in a year filled with the unexpected. Riley's forgiveness and Larkin's accountability creating space for a different kind of relationship than either had imagined possible. Phoebe sidled up beside Courtney, champagne flutes in hand. "Your work is selling like crazy. 3 red dots already, and we've barely opened." "It doesn't feel real," Courtney admitted, accepting the champagne. "Success? Or having all the key players in your personal drama gathered in one room without bloodshed?" Phoebe nodded toward the trio across the gallery. "Both," Courtney laughed softly. "A year ago, I couldn't have imagined any of this. Are you happy?" Phoebe's question was simple, but profound. Courtney considered carefully before answering. "I'm authentic. For perhaps the first time in my adult life, I'm moving through the world without performative filters, without compromising essential parts of myself to maintain relationships. And yes, that brings a kind of happiness I didn't know was possible." Later that evening, as the crowd thinned and the event wound down, Larkin approached her beside the centerpiece illustration, the woman at the crossroads that had become the symbolic heart of both the exhibition and Courtney's personal journey. "I'm proud of you," he said quietly, "not just for the success of the show, but for everything you've become through this process. You're extraordinary, Courtney Harvey." "So are you," she replied, meaning it. "The real you, not the perfect illusion you spent years projecting." He smiled, the expression reaching his eyes in a way that still felt new. "Ready for dinner?" Riley and Jasper suggested that new place on 7th. Actually," Courtney set down her empty glass. "Would you mind if we took a rain check? I'm feeling the need for quiet after all this socializing." 7 months earlier, such a request would have been couched in apologies and explanations, her own preferences subordinated to avoid potential disappointment. Now, she stated her needs directly, without defense or justification. "Of course," Larkin nodded, accepting her boundary without question. "Would you like me to reschedule with them? Or would you prefer to join another time? Tell them I'll see them for brunch tomorrow before they head back." She gathered her coat and bag. "And Larkin, would you like to come over later? Just to talk? It's been a significant day." His eyes lit with quiet pleasure. "I'd like that very much." As they parted ways temporarily, Larkin to explain to Riley and Jasper, Courtney to thank the last departing guests, she felt a profound sense of peace settle over her. The path forward remained uncertain in its details, but the foundation had been established. Truth over comfortable fiction, authenticity over performance, real connection over perfect illusion. 6 months later, on a crisp spring morning with cherry blossoms drifting like snow along the riverside, Larkin presented Courtney with a small box as they completed their weekend run. "What's this?" she asked, breathless from exertion rather than expectation. "Open it," he encouraged, his expression a mixture of nervousness and determination. Inside lay not a ring, as she had momentarily feared. They had agreed such gestures remained premature, but a key, simple and unadorned. "My lease is up next month," he explained. "I've been thinking about finding a new place, somewhere that isn't haunted by old patterns, somewhere we could both consider a fresh start, if and when you're ready." Courtney held the key, weighing both the metal and the metaphor in her palm. "You want us to move in together again?" "Not exactly." He sat beside her on a park bench, the morning light filtering through blossoms overhead. "I want to get a 2-bedroom place with a shared studio space. The second bedroom would be yours, a space that remains completely your own, even if you choose to share my room most nights. A tangible reminder that we're choosing to be together without surrendering independence." The thoughtfulness of the gesture, recognizing both her need for autonomy and their desire for connection, brought unexpected tears to Courtney's eyes. "You've really been listening," she said softly. "Every day." "Tut," he took her hand, the casual intimacy between them now comfortable rather than assumed. "What do you think?" Courtney closed her fingers around the key, feeling its potential, not as a tether or obligation, but as an invitation to write a new chapter together, eyes wide open to both possibility and reality. "I think," she said, meeting his gaze directly, "that real love is so much better than perfect illusion." 2 years to the day after Riley's unexpected phone call had shattered Courtney's reality, they gathered for a small dinner party in the light-filled apartment she and Larkin now shared. Riley and Jasper had driven in for the weekend, Phoebe had brought her new girlfriend, and the conversation flowed with the easy rhythm of people connected by genuine affection rather than obligation. In the kitchen, preparing dessert, Courtney found herself momentarily alone with Riley. The woman who had once represented her greatest fear now counted among her closest friends. "Sometimes I still can't believe we're here," Riley admitted, arranging berries atop the cheesecake they'd prepared together. "If someone had described this scenario to me 3 years ago, I would have thought they were delusional." "Life is stranger than fiction," Courtney agreed, the phrase that had become something of a mantra between them. "Are you happy?" Riley asked, echoing the question Phoebe had posed at the gallery opening a year earlier. Courtney glanced through the doorway to where Larkin sat, engaged in animated conversation with Jasper about a restoration project they were collaborating on, the architect and the craftsman finding unexpected common ground. She observed the ease in his posture, the authenticity in his laughter, the way he no longer seemed to calculate his responses for maximum approval. "Yes," she answered simply, "not because everything is perfect. It isn't, and never will be, but because everything is real." Later, as their guests departed and they moved through their evening routine in comfortable synchronicity, Larkin pulled Courtney into a spontaneous dance in their living room, spinning her gently to music only they could hear. "What's this for?" she laughed, settling into his embrace. "Because I can," he said, his expression open and unguarded. "Because I'm overwhelmed sometimes by how fortunate I am to have this second chance with you. Because I never want to take a single moment for granted again." As moonlight spilled across the floor of the home they had built together, not a resurrection of what was lost, but something entirely new created from the ashes of necessary destruction, Courtney recognized the profound truth that had emerged from their painful journey. Sometimes, what appears to be an ending is merely the first painful step toward a beginning of greater depth and authenticity than previously imagined possible. The lie that had nearly destroyed them had ultimately forced them both to confront essential truths about themselves. The perfect illusion had shattered, but from its fragments they had carefully, intentionally constructed something far more valuable, a relationship founded on complete acceptance of each other's full humanity, flaws and fears included. "I love you," Courtney whispered against his shoulder, the words carrying a weight and meaning that transcended their simple syllables. "Not some idealized version I've created in my mind, but you, the actual, complex, sometimes frustrating, always authentic person you are. And I love you," Larkin replied, his voice thick with emotion. "Enough to show you all of myself, even the parts I'm not proud of. Enough to stay and work through difficulties instead of running. Enough to build something real, however imperfect." Outside their window, the city continued its eternal rhythm. Lights blinking on and off, strangers passing on the sidewalk below, countless lives intersecting in moments of both connection and isolation. Within their carefully constructed sanctuary, two people who had experienced the painful consequences of convenient fiction now moved forward in deliberate truth, choosing each day to see each other clearly and love anyway. The perfect illusion had died, as all illusions eventually must. But what had grown in its place possessed a beauty all the more precious for its authenticity, a love not diminished by complete knowledge, but made stronger through it. If you enjoyed the story, leave a like and subscribe to the channel. And drop a comment below. What city are you watching from? And if your heart tells you to, feel free to leave me a tip on Buy Me a Coffee. Just check the first pinned comment. Thanks for keeping me company and for the coffee, and I'll see you in the next story.